Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and it's my absolute pleasure to be speaking with you and to be engaging with you, all but virtually, at this summit. My name is Stephen Wills, and I run a business called Procurement Central. So Procurement Central works in the training and education space, implementing academies, procurement academies, providing e-learning, bespoke procurement training solutions. And the whole point of that, I hear you ask, is to save you money, save your company's money, and to lock in value. What I want to do today is to talk to you about managing continuity. It's a very popular subject in these difficult and turbulent times, particularly as there's a lot of uncertainty. And the thing I want to talk to you most about is developing your strong relationships. And that's one of the key themes that we're going to be talking about, SRM, relationship management, especially as this is focused on indirect with professional services. So I've got a case study for you. I always think it's good to be talking about real life examples and not theory. Now, please, please, please ask as many questions as you wish. I always think that if you come to one of these events back in the day when they were live, or of course now when it's virtual, you should always engage, you should always ask a question. And do ask as many questions as you like, and I'll do my best whilst the session is going on to answer them. Now, as you have been so good as to come and watch this presentation, we will, if you let us have your email address, let you have a copy of a book in PDF form called Cost Cutting, A Cultural Shift to Sustainable Cost-Based Reduction. And that is a book that we've written, our associate, Mr. Peter Salmons, has written. So please let us have your email address afterwards and we'll send you a copy of that. So let's get into the case study. Let's get into the topic. We've got about 25 minutes. As I've said, ask as many questions as you possibly can. Managing continuity, that's the thing that a lot of companies are struggling with at the moment because of the uncertain times that we live in. And the cure to this we will discuss and we will share that with you. One of them is definitely around strong relationships with your suppliers, in particular using your professional services companies. And certainly as procurement is very, very close to legal, we found that collaborative relationships work best, and we both agree, both professions agree on that. Having a collaborative, a partnership in some cases, relationship works best. You get the assurity of supply. Now, one of the things that we've worked a lot in the Far East, in Asia, and one of the things we discovered working in Asia is that certainly relationships are being tested during these uncertain times. And if they're not strong, they're not working to the benefit of the organization. So clearly that needs to be addressed. The other thing is that disputes can be foreseen. We'll talk about that on the next slide. Disputes and the future can be foreseen, and consequently, because of the risk forecasting that we can do, you can forecast that and you can put contracts into place to deal with them. Now, some questions are being asked. We've heard that we've distilled this into 4 questions that we hear a lot, particularly when we travel, or these days we work virtually in Asia, is that how do companies avoid contract failing? How do companies deal with contract failure? Who is responsible? Who's accountable? If you remember the tool, the RACI, the RACI, Who is responsible and accountable for failure? How, of course, can we avoid that? How can we avoid contract disputes? And if we are in a situation like that, of course, how can we find resolutions? So let's try to discuss that. Let's try to open this up and talk a little bit about an area in Asia that we've spent a lot of time in, which is oil and gas, and of course the Middle East, where we work extensively. We looked into these questions. We started to investigate what was behind these questions and do a little bit of research. As I say, predominantly oil and gas, but this applies to many other sectors as well. So companies like oil and gas do operate in what we might describe as very, very dynamic sectors and environments. However, equally, they're very challenging as well. Asia has been impacted in two big ways, with the reduction in oil price and also with the coronavirus. So this has had a massive impact, as we know, around the world, but in particular in the Asia region. Really, companies, oil and gas, but other companies as well, must evaluate their supply chains. And obviously, one of the areas based on the workshops today is around the indirect supply chains, where probably they don't get enough attention, reference category management and supplier relationship management, and the overall procurement techniques. So evaluation and focus on procurement techniques, and in particular indirect supply chains. Now, for us, when we started to investigate the questions that we raised at the start of this presentation, 4 themes started to become identified that we believe companies in the Asia region must improve. And we'll share those 4 themes in one moment. In addition, focus on the indirects, as we just mentioned, that supply parts, materials and services required for the business. We will say at the end of this presentation that not enough companies treat indirects as adding value. They see them more as an expense, a non-critical, possibly expense item. So the focus of that needs to change. And as you will be aware, an indirect supply chain is critical to deliver the equipment, and in particular in the sector that we focused on, that find, extract, refine, and eventually market the oil and gas. So through our work in Asia, we found some supply chain practices actually fit behind other industries that use strategic and collaborative SRM, supplier relationship management. So there were companies that we went in and we worked with, and we were obviously very honored to be asked to go and assist those companies, but we did find that there was a gap between their practices and where other companies were. 4 themes started to appear and became the forefront for the companies that we started to work with. And by finding these 4 themes and then focusing on these 4 themes, we were able to assist these companies with a reduction in cost and through SRM locking in value. The locations that we covered are listed here, that we actually went to visit, although we've been many times, multiple times, to all of those areas. And the companies that we worked with are on the right. So big name companies, multiple companies in oil and gas, multiple work, but you'll also see there big manufacturing companies as well. Now, according to a reputable source, namely the Harvard Business Review, they basically identified, and you've probably heard this before we have introduced it on this slide, that you know that purchased products and services account for more than 50% of a company's cost. And the Harvard Business Review identified this for oil and gas. So sometimes it can be between 50 and 70% of their costs are usually external services and products. I mean, you could argue it's a lot more than that, of course, if you were to outsource many of the functions that you currently pay salaries for in-house, but external on your P&L, on your ledgers, is around about between 50 and 70%. So consequently, any benefit, any improvement that we can deliver will go straight, as the saying goes, to the bottom line. So a 5% reduction in cost results in a straight bottom line improvement to the profit margin. So this is why many companies are looking at, and have been looking at, sustainable reduction in their cost base, and obviously maintaining that. And in other cases, of course, pushing on, not just reducing cost, but improving value. Let's look then at these 4 themes that came up time and time again when we were working with companies. And one is that knowledge, supply chain knowledge, knowing what's going to happen, predicting what's going to happen, is critical for companies. Developing strong supplier relationship management will avoid contract failure, will help you with the knowledge, with the relationship with the supplier. Having regular meetings, being open and transparent will help you to secure a surety of supply. Training and developing your talent, your people, will help you to find resolutions and helping you to either develop the people you've got in-house or to bring in people with the right skills, which obviously will be around strategic procurement, but it will also be around business knowledge. A lot of people who go into procurement, particularly in oil and gas, have an engineering background, which is critical for the industry that they work in. And then the 4th theme that we're going to pick up on is technology. So e-procurement, other tools in the technology space, in the indirect space, are critical for us. And again, we will say that in some cases, we found that there was a gap with other sectors where, in particular, oil and gas lagged behind. So let's talk about theme 1. Let's talk about effective market intelligence. We identified this as having a gap, seeing that in some cases, companies in Asia were not doing this as well as other sectors. You do not need a crystal ball. You do not need to go to the fortune teller and ask them what the future holds for you. COVID was seen, was predicted, although it still surprised us. People didn't think it could happen to them. People thought it was different in some regions, in some places. So consequently, the cultures were different. So consequently, even though it was identified, it still happened and it still surprised nearly every country. Nobody was really fully prepared for it. And so clearly forecasting and gathering data adds value, not cost, and mitigates risks. And obviously, again, with a professional services company, Gartner, you can go and spend money, and you should spend money to find this information out. So this knowledge, this effective market intelligence will help companies with capacity planning, thinking for the future, which markets to buy from, how to set prices, and selecting, of course, the right suppliers. You can see the future. You can look at a tool like Pestle. You can use the work of Porter and CrowdCheck to start to identify and think strategically about your categories, about your supply chains, to know what is going to happen in the future. You will make predictions. Where I believe a lot of companies has gone wrong is that the executive, the board of management, the seniors in the companies do not always listen. And maybe that's the fault of the people that are pitching to them. Maybe we need to be stronger, more assertive with our message that there are risks coming. There will always be pandemics or financial crisis that affect things like oil price or bring pandemics like COVID. So we don't know the date they're going to happen, but we do know with some certainty they will happen. So, but maybe it's in the message, maybe it's in the storytelling that we're not, maybe it's in the lack of influence that perhaps procurement have had. But certainly getting that message across is critical so that these risks that we find with our effective market intelligence can be mitigated. Theme 2, locking in value. Once you've got something, once you've got a saving, once you've got a new supplier, a new outsourcing agreement, how do you sustain that? And the answer is that you have supplier relationship management, which is not a soft skill. It is a very tensioned arrangement that you have with your supplier. And obviously at the heart of that is a contract and probably a service level agreement. So making sure that you identify, with the help of CrowdCheck, you identify who is going to be your collaborative partner, who is going to be a sole sourced bottleneck perhaps, and who are the non-critical and the leverage suppliers. So firstly, in the category management, thinking about that segmentation. Contract and SRM are not, we've seen, always best practice in the companies we've gone in. And as a consequence, companies will come across supply chain risks. To improve this, companies must adopt a method of benchmarking and use, again, indirect professional service companies like consultants. Consultants do have a reputation for burning money, being very expensive, so obviously they need to be selected and handled with care. It can provide very, very key information, specialist information for you in your business. And then in supplier relationship management, oil and gas companies in particular, but other companies in Asia, must measure the key performances to make sure that they are putting the KPIs to make sure that they're monitoring the effectiveness of SRM. So to get us started, we don't just jump to SRM, we need some sort of governance, and you'll see here certainly the kind of governance across the top, supplier information, gather information, have a developed strategy, think about your strategic sourcing and your contract for SRM. Think about sustainability, diversity, the legal department, working closely with them. In the case of oil and gas, health and safety. So governance and a process are critical to making this fully effective and making sure that your costs and your value lock-in are managed effectively. So just to recap, professional services in the case of providing information and providing strong knowledge about companies, help with cost reduction, and use, of course, get us to use and think about TCO, total cost of ownership, total acquisition cost for equipment and service. So TCO includes from the start to the end. It's not, we don't focus on price, we focus on looking at the total cost of a category. This gives us a much more strategic vision where we can then aim to take cost out. Let's talk about theme 3, which is technology. So yes, in the direct side of the business for oil and gas, they've looked at using technology to go and help them find oil. But now we're saying in indirect, let's focus on the systems for inventory management, demand forecasting we've mentioned, SRM and contract management, and of course, e-procurement. Let's make sure that our technology solutions are up to date and we've got budget for it. It can be expensive, but it can also be very effective as well. And the fourth theme is around people. That's where we've had probably the greatest impact working with companies, is to look at the development of the existing people and to identify where skills gaps occur and provide the right training and development. So there is a shortage. That is a fact of supply chain and procurement talent due to the knowledge through the aging workforce and of course skill shortages. Some of the measures that can be adopted, of course, we would advocate this, are training of talent in critical supply functions, establishment of a centre of excellence and academies. We're getting a lot of interest in providing academies to nurture procurement and supply chain talent. So let's bring this, we're almost out of time, not quite, but we're almost out of time. So let's just bring these 4 themes to conclusion and talk about them. The good news is we've identified them as gaps. The good news is we've also said how we can provide closure of that gap. So here we have 6 bullet points just to conclude the presentation around summary and some challenges. So one of the challenges is that indirect professional services are sometimes seen as an expense and not as adding value. So that's a mindset change that people need to go through. Some procurement best practices have been done well and succeeded in Asia and in oil and gas, but improvement still remains. There is, as we've said in the 4 themes, more requirement for demand planning to maintain equipment uptime and productivity. Improvement for indirect category management is where a lot of companies need now to focus. They've looked at the direct side and obviously focused largely with the operational teams there, but the indirect side, indirect category management, as well as working in partnership with those companies and developing supplier relationship management, using automation through P2P and e-sourcing will provide, and 3-way matching will provide saving opportunities and lock in value. Don't just get savings and then let them float away. You've got to use SRM to lock in the value. Technology and people development are critical to get right, and we're not seeing enough of that with the work that we're doing. More can be done. And effective deployment of procurement best practices helps to reduce cost sustainably. So just to conclude on who we are, and remember, get your questions in. Keep coming with those questions. We're seeing some great questions, but keep them coming in. Procurement training academies is what we do with learning management systems, LMS, providing training that's fit for sectors and companies. So oil and gas is different to automotive. So making sure that the training fits the business, fits the company, making sure that in these days we've got an e-learning option, which we have, to transfer our knowledge from our experts, which I'll quickly show you who they are in a moment. So this delivers. What does it deliver? What's in it for you? Why should you work with us? Why should you, hopefully you've already answered that for yourself in the presentation you've seen, but why should you work with us? Well, what we deliver with you is indirect spend management and cost reduction that generate profitability. We saw that from the Harvard Business Review, the 50 to 60% of the cost base, make yourself a saving there. It goes straight to the bottom line and improves profitability. Sourcing, make sure your strategic sourcing assures supplies through difficult times. It's a very disruptive world in which we live in. We need to get the choices right with the right suppliers, and making sure that those suppliers are managed effectively with SRM, and that we've got the right contracts, the legal aspects to avoid any disruption or deal with disputes. And then the fourth point, strategic procurement, is really revolving a lot around category management. These really are the four answers to the four questions that we were asked and have been asked. These are the four answers that get you the solutions that your business so desperately needs. We are a bunch of experts, all with very, very senior backgrounds. These are the people, these are the tried and trusted people who sit around the world and work with companies like yours, all through the Americas, all through Europe, Asia, and so on. So we are not one person, we are many, and we will find solutions for you. Remember, let me have your email address so I can send you a copy of our fabulous book, Cost Cutting, the Shift to Sustainable Cost-Based Reduction. Log on to our website, have a look at procurementcentral.co.uk for some of the e-courses and some of the virtual courses that we can deliver and other resources that we have. I know you've been supplying me with your questions, but if you've got more questions, keep them coming in. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see those questions and to be able to answer them for you. So thank you very much, and it's been my pleasure to be talking to you.